Hello and welcome. We're back to reviews this Community Shield game. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone in the comments are doing well. How are you two doing first and foremost?
I'm good. I was there at the game. It was a fun game to be in. I was in the city end. Weird first time in the opposition end, but it was a great game, great performance. Happy to finally beat them in 3 years since the FA Cup. I did say it was like the most important game since that game, apart from the league. But yeah, it was great to beat them and great to be on the other side of this, like with the trophy picks and all this stuff. So yeah, I'm happy. Very happy that we won the game.
Yeah, no, I was very excited because I always said beforehand that I felt like this was bigger than I felt like fans were making it seem out to be. I never thought that this is a glorified friendly. And I think when you go into a season with a title challenge against this type of team, you can't give them an inch. And this idea that we would just go in and kind of see how we do was not something that I was prepared to kind of go for. Of course, I didn't think the result would somehow drastically change our perceptions of this team and its ability, but it was important. And I'll kind of maintain that same energy even after a win. It's important. It doesn't mean that we therefore are guaranteed a title or anything like that, but it is very important to draw blood against an opponent that, let's have it right, treated us like a child every time that they faced us. And I think that we had really good moments last season where, especially in the FA Cup fixture, I've never seen a team do what we did to City, but ultimately to actually get the win is something that was hugely important for the kind of mentality of the young team. To actually go into the season knowing that we can beat them is huge. And make no mistake about it, it's incredible. And I think the way that we did it was interesting. I think Rice, Partey were critical to it, and I think that there was a couple performances in terms of Saliba, Ben White, Aaron Ramsdale, top performances there. And look, when you get a big win like that, you want to kind of basically praise every single player. But I think those three were exceptional on the night, and our pivot did so much to talk about, because I think there's a couple tactic stuff that I would love to get into that City tried to do and we didn't let them do.
Yeah, I think the main thing to start off with would probably be the 2-on-1 versus Timber in the first half. I think that was, for me, where I think Pep would, and I said this on Twitter, I think that Pep wanted to draw blood from Timber. I think he really wanted to look at that as a new signing coming in his first competitive game. He just thought, look, we need to get this guy a bit more uncomfortable. And I drew it up here, and it looked like, for me anyway, it looked like basically Pep wanted to try and really play 2v1 game. We moved Deck out wide a bit to try and to when the turnovers happen, to get Timber up the pitch a bit more. Deck can drop and then the Timber can move up a bit more. But what did you guys think about that 2v1 that Pep tried to implement?
But that was more, in my opinion, kind of a response to them not being able to progress properly. Like,
Yeah.
if you looked at it, they kind of pushed both fullbacks, and it wasn't just for me necessarily Timber. Like, he tried to make Akanji and
That
Kyle
was more in the
Walker
second half,
both.
did you not feel?
Well, it
think
was more in the second half, but it was also a response to the fact that we stifled their progression. Because if you really looked at it, they had a 2-4-4 build-up, right? And they kept Kyle Walker and Akanji wide in kind of the middle third. But what ended up happening is that we were very aggressive in our press, and we were very compact. We basically had Odegaard and Havertz that would be a front two and a 4-4-2. But
and
wherever
Deck
the
is sort of
ball
like a
side,
10, right?
well, Declan, less so on a 10, he was just a cover shadow, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like,
He
whichever
was
side, the ball side was on. So if it was on the right, and, that meant that Havertz had to press up because that's kind of his side,
Yeah.
that meant Deck would slot in the middle and basically stop the entry pass into Rodri, or stop the second pivot, which was Kovacic and Rodri. They would switch, kind of depend. And Declan would just support that press in that way, and it was excellent to see. And then sometimes what they ended up making was Ortega tried to make a back three, or they would have Rodri try to drop himself and take himself out of the midfield line. But what that did was they ended up trying to cheat the inside forwards inside, which was Bernardo Silva and Grealish, right? And that's when they got joy, which is when the fullbacks overlapped. And that was the change in the second half. And we ended up seeing more of that City box midfield where you had the back three, but you had basically Bernardo and Grealish on the inside as 10s. That wasn't the case in the first half. In the first half, they were quite wide. They were the width. And that was the change that I think was really struggling from a Pep perspective. But from an Arsenal perspective, we had this fluidity where Declan Rice could join the back line and create buildup and allow Timber to go a little bit farther ahead.
Hmm.
And what that meant was Timber was not receiving in the wide left channel. Declan was receiving central, which wasn't the case last game. That we were talking. We didn't want to see him in a wing fielder role, and he wasn't. He was a lot more central and a lot more potent. And I think that switch actually let Ben White cheat and become himself 2v1. Like, ironically, it wasn't even the Timber 2v1 I was looking at. It was more our perspective. I saw Ben White cheat far side far more, and that was because we had the flexibility that Timber would invert and it would be kind of protected by Declan Rice in the back line. And we
But
used this dynamic brilliantly.
I think the first 20 minutes was a boring game in the sense that no real chances were created because City couldn't break through us centrally, and out wide they didn't have any dynamism at all to create through like 1-2s or overlaps. The Walker overlap was really stifled because I think Martinelli, despite not having the greatest game, defensively was very important on that left-hand side to cut off the Walker cutback because
Yeah.
throughout the whole
That's how
first half,
that's how they got their goal, because Tierney had to track the Walker
cutbacks, yeah.
Walker cutback, and it left space for Cole Palmer to take that touch and hit, and that's how they got their goal. But the one thing I wanted to touch on as well is, I think the main thing for me was the ability to have the central zones in terms of our defensive work. Centrally, we were so compact that they kept trying. Ironically, what we kind of malign on the channel, and when we play badly, they kind of had this U-shaped progression. They kept going wide. Grealish, couple of taps, and then back. Same with Bernardo, couple of taps, then back. Like, they kind of tried to progress in wide areas, and George touched on it. But I wanted both of you to expand on how you felt that we kind of we stifled their central progression.
Well, I mean, I think a big thing Chris was just saying kind of in the chat that he's got a board up, and we'll talk about it because I referenced it earlier, but, Rodri kind of in the back three in terms of looking at our press right now. You can kind of see it in this pick. Like, this was the solution that Man City wanted to do because originally they had a 2-4-4. So if you just see, I'll kind of point everybody's direction to Rodri, who is the center of the back three. He was a lot deeper next to Havertz, kind of in the first 20 minutes. This was the change that you saw typically a lot more so kind of in the second half, and where Kyle Walker, instead of being this deep and as well as the Kanji this deep, they pressed on a lot higher up into the pitch, which would force kind of Grealish and Bernardo Silva to be interior options between the lines. Here, if you see, we've got a complete overload in terms of how are they going to be able to kind of play through us, because they've only really got Kovacic there, which is man marked by Odegaard. And then Stones doesn't really have an outlet. I mean, he can pass it off to a Kanji, but Saka's there. And, right now you've basically got kind of Declan Rice and, our pivot option is there to block any kind of pass entry into Grealish, who is kind of on that side. And that was the issue that City faced. And so ultimately we were constantly outnumbering them kind of in the middle third. And this is kind of the issues that City had to overcome. And a big part of it was basically just pushing their fullbacks high and wide. And I love that because it puts a lot of narratives out on Twitter, because I think everybody's been thinking that the inverted fullback has been kind of the way in order to create superiority out wide. And that's not what City did. They really used their fullbacks as more traditional fullbacks in the role. Even though that they were center backs, they still kind of used them in traditional fullback roles. And I think that Arsenal did a really good job about keeping centrally compact, mainly because of Declan. I felt that Partey was really vertical. But Declan was really good in terms of jumping when he needed to jump, and he was a really good recovery partner to Partey, who I felt had more freedom because of the security of Declan in the pivot.
I think the first 20 minutes Partey was very poor. I think
Yeah,
on the ball, I think he rushed every single action. Even the Rodri shot came from Partey passing the ball across unnecessarily when he had time on the ball. I think as he grew into the game, after the 20 minutes, he was probably great until the goal, which we will get into. But I think the first half, Declan Rice was very important. I think he was the leader in our press, weirdly. He's not even been there
for sure.
From where I was sitting, I could see him instructing Partey to step up. Sometimes they would switch who was the third man in that like narrow
the cover
front
shadow.
three. Yeah, the narrow front three. They would switch that a lot, I think. to see him be that important this early is a great
Reassuring.
indicator
Yeah.
into what he will be maybe in a couple months, let alone next year or the year after. But I think after 20 minutes, Ortega did step into the back three, as you said. Ortega became the central centre back. But even after that, once they bypassed Havertz or bypassed Erdegaard, they didn't necessarily trust Ruben Diaz to step up the pitch with the ball, which is something we probably have. We trust our centre backs to drive the ball, step into midfield. It's something they lacked, and they don't have a winger anyways. So when I think the difference between them and us early in the game was we created 2 chances from Saka 1v1 with Akanji, and they can't do that. They can't ping the ball to a winger, put 1v1 with a fullback and create a cutback or something from the box. But that is something we have said they need to develop, losing Amares. And it's something they don't have until Cole Palmer, but he himself is not that great. But George, I can see you want to say something.
Well, yeah, just because like when you have a look at kind of just the build-up issues, right? Like Riyad Mahrez, what he does is he gives you an isolation 1v1 where Bernardo Silva doesn't have that same gravitas. Like he can't isolate kind of Timber out wide 1v1. He wants to cut inside. He wants to be involved in play. He wants touches centrally. And so when he does receive the ball out wide, his constant first kind of thought is to cut inroads. And that doesn't work unless you've got a dynamic overlap on the other wing, which is ironically exactly how they got the goal, and people hammering kind of Kieran Tierney, which is very weird to me. I mean, Gabriel, we'll talk about that. Gabriel isn't near him. So that 2v1 is not something that, Tierney is able to get to. But that threat of the overlap is what creates the space. What was happening in the first half, when you had this 2-4-4 of Stones and Diaz kind of in the back, they had this U-shaped passing because Walker and Akanji were very conservative, right? And Alvarez couldn't find space between the lines. So they had this kind of pivot, and they had this somewhat box a lot deeper, right? So they had Diaz, Stones, Kovacic, and Rodri. That was their City box. That was a lot deeper, where ideally you would want the Rodri, Kovacic, Grealish, and Alvarez, who was Bernardo Silva a lot later in the game. That's the box that you want, and that's what City couldn't do. And it was all because our press was so phenomenal in terms of making sure, Declan Rice was kind of the key component in this, because we were allowed to keep Thomas Partey deep, and Declan could kind of cheat and be a lot higher. And really, Declan toyed with them, throughout the entire match. And I don't even think Declan's fit. I'll be honest.
No, he's not. I think, yeah. The one thing I wanted to ask both of you is, and this is what I was planning to write on anyway. What did you make of the vertical staggering of our pivot, and how important was that in terms of in and out of possession? Because in possession as well, we had them on different levels, and they were interchanging between going into the centre back zones, going into more advanced higher zones for carries, for example, or Partey trying to be a bit more vertical with his passing. What did you make of the staggering of our midfield?
Oh, I thought you were gonna go. I think it was an interesting dynamic. We didn't have that last season. We didn't have
which is why I asked.
We didn't have the ability to switch them throughout the game. I think it makes you a bit unpredictable. But again, Rice didn't look 100% to me, which is why he came off early. I think there's so much potential, because I don't think either of them were a 9 out of 10 yesterday. I think there's a lot more potential to go with what we could see from the midfield. But I think Rice in the attacking third was interesting, switching sides. I think it was better when we saw Emil come on, but that was because of the injuries. But I don't think it particularly aided the attack, because I think there was no real late run into the box. It took that away from the attack. It's something we had last season with whoever was left centre mid late run. I think that was taken away with the dynamic of yesterday. I don't think in the future it could be there, but as of now, I don't think that was what we saw.
Well, the biggest thing that City struggled with, let's call a spade, is basically the Gundogan effect. Like they struggled not having that lone pivot versus the double pivot, and there's growing pains between having Kovacic and Rodri together in terms of what they're able to do in terms of build up. And they don't carry the same between the line ability. when you compare Gundogan and Kovacic. Kovacic is an excellent ball carrier, but he's almost this kind of, I call him a water carrier, where he carries the ball to somebody else to deal with.
Yeah.
He doesn't deal with it himself. And so when you have a look at it right now, if Rodri's going to be man-marked by Declan Rice, which is a huge thing that we did, who is going to be the next person that has the responsibility? And look, Grealish should have taken more responsibility, in my opinion, dropping deep. He didn't. He stayed wide, I'm sure, because that's a tactical instruction. Like, he wants his wingers wide to stretch the pitch, but they needed another person that was better in the final third, as in terms of offering themselves as an option. And that's what Gundogan gave them. And they didn't have that in this match for a good portion.
Kovacic carried, in terms of his best attribute is ball carrying. Do you feel like he carried the ball, as in that would be the main function of him in that midfield? Surely, do you feel like he actually did enough in terms of ball carrying? I didn't feel like he did as much.
I don't think there was the space for him to do it because of how he received the ball. I think when he received the ball, he'd look to his left and see Rice. He'd look over his right shoulder and see Partey. So he wouldn't really drive with the ball. He'd probably lay it off to Diaz or Grealish and receive the ball back to their feet. I don't think, apart from a ball over the top, they could do much. I think we closed the
and that's
space
why the
very
central
much.
progression was cut off.
Centrally, they had to work wide, and they don't have good width right now. They didn't have good width either side until I think Foden came on. But they didn't have good width.
It's not even qualitative, it's qualitative. Even the qualitative superiority isn't there because they don't have Akanji doesn't have the ability to go and create that 2-on-1 consistently. And Walker, as well as he tried, we tracked his runs very well. So I don't think it's not, even if you if I'm Pep, I'm not thinking about, I know I don't have the same 1v1 specialist. I'm thinking, how can I get the numerical superiority to create those overloads to get the cutbacks in?
How do you guys think he could have got that? Because with our press yesterday,
maybe Sergio Gomez.
How would you have bypassed our press?
No, I think he figured it out a lot later on into the match, but too late, ideally. I mean, obviously Kevin De Bruyne wasn't fit enough for him to employ somebody between the lines, but simply having Grealish come inside a little bit more and employing maybe a more consistent overlap on the left would have been something that could have helped. He basically pushed Kyle Walker as the wide fullback and had Bernardo Silva receiving inside instead of Alvarez, and that immediately helped a lot more in the second half, right? And having those between the line options, even though they don't have a great passer from deep, in that sense that if Rodri's marked, there isn't really a secondary passing option. What it allowed is Bernardo to be a lot more free, and Bernardo could cheat and come into the pivot, right? And he would be replaced by Alvarez up top. So that's what happened, really. And I don't know why he kept Kyle Walker deep. I'm not going to complain, but one thing that we have to talk about is Martinelli. He was huge in terms of pushing that kind of pushing that kind of channel back, because he was responsible for kind of covering both Alvarez as well as Kyle Walker. And say you don't have that kind of pressing ability, then you basically don't allow Bernardo Silva to cheat. And he stopped that entry pass quite a bit, and Timber was excellent 1v1 in that area. So that was kind of, I think, the big switch that Pep at least tried to do. But ultimately, when you ask their wingers to come inside, right, you're asking our fullbacks to cheat inside. And how well are they able to cope with that 1v1? That's the question. And look, I said it before, Ben White was world class. He was phenomenal on the day. And so was William Saliba, because a big thing that we still haven't talked about yet is when City got frustrated and they wanted to go long, Saliba gave Haaland nothing in terms of both cutbacks, in terms of both touches.
I'm surprised it took you this long to get on, because
I'm saving it because I've said all the other stuff beforehand, but this for me was like one of the best things.
Before you go, Chris, what was the first thing I said to you when we came out the ground? You remember?
You said Saliba gave Haaland nothing, and Haaland was scared of him, actually.
Yeah,
I think Haaland was scared of him. He had 12 touches, I believe.
Don't even talk about the touches. Talk about that play where he's 1v1 and he goes and he turns back and he recycles the ball. I've never seen Haaland do that, not once. And you know why? He knows that he can't keep up with Saliba in a leg race. He's got to win against Saliba in terms of that first one-touch break into the channel. Like, he can't compete with him 1v1. And so ultimately, that was kind of the story of this match. We were able to go 1v1 in the press. It was phenomenal from us. We had athletes all over the pitch, and we actually kind of churned out our best compact performance that we've seen in the entire preseason.
But I also think City's setup allowed us to shrink the pitch. without the overlaps, without the running behind. Like apart from Kyle Walker, they don't have a running behind out wide.
No, but the thing is, it's not even
and you
that.
have
Just think
four.
about it. We say it constantly on the channel. Where is the space in a pivot? The
It's
space
gonna-
is out wide, and they don't have the ability to exploit the space out wide. So it's kind of toast from there.
If they don't buy, how do you think this translates across the whole season? If they don't get another winger,
I mean, they're going to have to do what I said beforehand in terms of having their center back fullbacks be traditional fullback roles. And
Yeah.
they're going to have to push their wingers, which are effectively pseudo 10s, and have them come inside to form the box because ultimately they just lacked between the line presence. That simply was what it was. And they're not going to face Arsenal and Arsenal's 1v1 athletes
again,
every game. And that's going to be like a 1-2 time thing that they're going to struggle with. They just are. And, I think Phil Foden had a part to play in this in the second half. I think he didn't do, enough when he came on, but he still has to get a little bit more responsibility in this team because that's another player that can help get you out. Like we're talking about a secondary passer from deep.
we saw it.
Yeah,
We
did.
Get them out of trouble.
Well, that's the point, right? Like, but he didn't have enough of a responsibility in terms of this match. And I think had we done that, yeah, sure, like he would have really succeeded. And I do agree with kind of this comment. They could absolutely use a Tierney. And ironically, if we ever were to be okay with it, I mean, Pep would jump at the chance to have somebody like that in the squad. And it's not just Tierney, but an Alphonso Davies, like that type of fullback. He's asking his fullback to be a lot more traditional. And I think the irony that I'm seeing right now is Pep is transitioning to a very traditional symptom. Yeah, a very traditional back four with the fullbacks operating as his high and wide options. He's having a genuine double pivot in the back there. And it's becoming a lot more traditional in terms of his play. And look, shock horror, it's not something that, we have strayed from this channel. We said that this was the transition that was coming. But again, in order to stop that, Arsenal did the best thing in terms of packing the center, right? Because if you have people that are good 1v1 out wide, it forces them to progress centrally. And if they don't have that specialty, then they'll struggle.
One thing I did want to ask you, because I remember we talked about this before on the channel, was this as close to your libero role that you could imagine?
Well, with Declan, I mean, yeah,
no, with Saliba, I mean, because he was that cover defender in behind because he was our last defender, wasn't he? And then Haaland.
Well, libero role has a bit more in possession, and that's what Declan kind of helped to do, right? Like, I mean,
okay.
the recovery defender aspect is more just the responsibility of who was 1v1. And, Saliba had Haaland and he was preoccupied. But exactly how I talked about, Declan slotting in to the back line is kind of what we saw in this match. And, I'll go back to kind of the original thing so that people in the chat can see what I'm talking about. So originally, like we talked about this kind of back three system. And, you have this libero in the back who's responsible for ball progression. But look at your DM and look at how that changes kind of, as you get higher up the pitch. And we saw a lot of this in terms of our DM, which is the number 4 here, which is Declan Rice, slot back into the back line and offer himself as an option. The only thing that we didn't see here, and, that is more aggressive, is number 2, which is Ben White, was hiked up next to Saka. That's what it allowed us to do. And so we were able to kind of have a 2v1 against City, in this aspect. And look, we isolated Akanji, and it was smart too. I think Kyle Walker's the better 1v1 defender, but, it has more to do with the matchups of Nelly versus, Kyle Walker versus Bukayo Saka versus Akanji. And that's kind of essentially what we benefited from. But the biggest benefit here is, a pick that kind of Chris has put up, and we'll probably put it up for the viewers here. This for me was the story. It's Declan Rice man marking Rodri, and City not being able to kind of break out of this. And despite them having Ortega try to do it, and they switch with Rodri, they had no presence between the lines here. And that was because they weren't able to kind of fight through the press. And, they tried to go long. I don't think they had enough success in doing that. They don't have enough of an outlet if Haaland is not receiving. And that's the key.
You can see he is going long. You can see the stature of Ortega, exactly what he's trying to do. Because I think when the ball came from the left centre back, Diaz, we cheated that side actually. Erdegaard was never high up on him. He let him receive the ball, gave him time, then closed. I think we wanted if anyone is going to have time on the ball, which you have to concede when you go this high up on certain sides, Diaz was the guy who had the ball and couldn't do much of it. He couldn't progress. He couldn't drive. He couldn't play a ball over the top to the right wing. It's something they really do lack in their system and something they will need to change. As we keep saying, something they will need to add. I do think it was rare when they bypassed us, but when they did that, I think our centre backs, even fullbacks, especially Ben White, were very good. 1v1 or 2v1. I think they were very comfortable apart from one moment in the game, which is what I think City do. I think they're so consistent at keeping the ball and sustaining pressure that it really takes one mistake for them to score. Because I think for 90 minutes, we made really one mistake, which could have ended up in a goal, and that mistake was the Partey mistake. But what did you make of our build-up, George? Because I think Declan was dropping left centre-back, left-back sometimes switching with Timber. Actually, Timber would drop. Declan would step up. What did you make of our build-up and how it formed with your libero role, as you keep mentioning?
Well, I mean, it's something that I predicted, so I'm going to narcissistically clap myself on the back there. We'll throw up a picture because I think pictures help with people. And you've got a really good job here of looking at this kind of 2-3 build up. But I'll point to kind of just some people in the back here. Declan Rice is running back to kind of form a 3, and there was at times, in order to make sure that we built, properly, Timber, when that happened, would typically drop next to Partey, and he would form kind of the 3-2. And we would flip between a 3-2 and a 2-3. Here, the reason that we've got this 2-3 is Ben hasn't made his overlap yet. And as we're working kind of this position, Declan would drop in the middle to form a back 3. And then once that happened, Ben would push right up next to Saka. And we tried to do this because then it allowed Martin Odegaard to actually find a little bit more space between the lines. Have a look at Man City right now. They see the press is on, and all 3 of them are vacating the pivot. Look at Rodri and Kovacic. They've got eyes only for the ball at this point, and they're gone. If you can imagine now, when Declan receives this ball, and I would, if we went back to this exact frame, I would imagine that, Declan slots to form the left center back role. Timber would kind of go in the inside, and we would have an ability to basically find Partey, who switches out quickly and can find Odegaard between the lines. And boom, that right-hand side now is outnumbered. It's got superiority because both Kovacic and Rodri have vacated their spots. And that's what I think we really did well to kind of attract at this point in time. I think one big thing is Grealish, by the way. Grealish wasn't defensively secure enough in two-way transitions, and so it allowed that overlap to really be successful, right? Like when Ben would push up, Grealish wasn't very good in terms of tracking his run. And so this is kind of something that happened kind of all throughout the match, really, and this is kind of how we really got control. And I think Declan gives us that versatility to, again, offer himself as an option in the back line. And from his kind of previous history of playing as a center back, that's the benefit of having somebody like that on the inside. Now, one thing I loved, I think Timber was excellent 1v1, by the way, and especially defensively. He really, while he, I don't think was excellent between the lines, he had excellent body feints and he was secure. I don't think he progressed us in the final third as much. That responsibility fell to Declan, and that's okay.
I also think he looked
is good.
He looked uncomfortable seeing angles that he did, like passing to the striker or passing to the left winger. Like he messed up a couple passes to Martinelli over the top sometimes on the floor, and it is what kind of led to him getting taken off. Plus an injury, fatigue. That led to him getting taken off the passing. I think that's something he'll learn and something he hasn't ever done. He's never really played left back, especially at these angles, switching with Declan and all this stuff. But
well, the irony is, mate, like we were talking about this when we first signed Timber, me and you, like he is ironically extremely conservative when he's in the back line, and his passing is extremely conservative. When he finds himself in midfield, he's adventurous. But in terms of him in the back line and then stepping in, he's very conservative still, and I don't mind that, especially when you've got a Declan Rice who can carry the way that he can carry. I think it's fine to kind of offer that. And I'll be honest, I prefer it because it actually forces Declan Rice central. If we switch that responsibility and we allowed Timber to really be that kind of inverted fullback that we saw of last season, I think we see more Declan Rice wing fielder roles. And I don't like that.
I think it was very purposeful though. Like even in the screenshot, why made sure to see that he was running back. You could see the action of Declan running back to either be in the free or just to receive the ball. I think it was either Partey receives and turns, Ødegaard receives. That all the midfield three were constantly drop in, receive, turn and face. If you don't see anything, you turn. You trust the centre back with the ball. I don't think we entrusted Timber to do it, and it was good. He wasn't comfortable yet. He may end up being comfortable, but right now he wasn't comfortable. But what I wanted to ask you guys, because we predicted Nketiah would start. Haaland did start. Haaland, Havertz, he looked more like Haaland yesterday.
Yeah.
Havertz did start. I saw people calling him a false nine, which I disagree with, because he plays like
Not every person that can play midfield and is a 9 plays like a false 9.
Yeah, he plays like
He's a 9, man.
A big body. He pins himself. He wins aerial duels. What did you make of his game and how he worked for us as an outlet from pressure? What did you guys make of him?
I don't think he pinned center backs. Like I had this game. I don't understand this. Look, he did well on 2 occasions to bring the ball down from long balls, and he did his job. When there's a really high press, that was the whole reason that we, in theory, bought him, right, as a target man to bring down balls and link play, right? He did it great twice. Did he pin center backs and pin Diaz down? No, he didn't. Was he really diligent off the ball? Absolutely. I don't know about this. Again, the contact in terms of what he was able to do, there were 2 moments that were really good that people like to quote from this match about his contact. And he brought it down, but, if you actually look at it, it kind of bounces off both markers twice. And, he gets lucky in terms of being able to play the ball out after that. I think he just did a functional job in the press. I was more impressed with what he did filling passing lanes and how he was able to be really smart when Declan would cheat to the right. Havertz would drop in and replace his spot, and he was really good in that aspect. I still think that he needs a lot more to do if we want to make him a true target man. And the irony is, if I was to replace Dominic Calvert-Lewin with Kai Havertz, who would do a better role in terms of what we're asking here? It's pretty simple. Who would? I just think that Kai Havertz should do a little bit better in terms of some of his finishing. But again, this idea that he was phenomenal under contact, I think is a little bit beneficial. I think it's a little bit overzealous. He had good moments. I still don't think he created separation. I don't think he pinned center backs and was able to play off in the same way.
He didn't create space. I would say that.
No.
I don't think he
did well to link. He did well to link and bring others into play.
For me, I think he was never. I think the positive for me was that he was never bullied. And I think they call him like a victim or he gets bullied by centre backs. But I think that's overblown. I think he does well to not get bullied, but he never bullies like Nketiah did when he came on.
Can I ask you, is that something that we should ask of a 6'4" man though? Again, I understand it, but I feel like we're being very generous to certain people. And I look at Eddie Nketiah, by the way, the same 2 moments that everybody praises the contact under play. Eddie in 25 minutes offered himself as an outlet and was able to do the exact same thing. And the one benefit of Kai, and that I don't think Eddie carries, is he is more intelligent in the press. I don't think that Eddie is able to do the same role that Kai did in terms of understanding when to drop in and whatnot.
But the same is the reverse. The same as I don't think Kai can do what Eddie could do. I don't think he's as good an outlet. I don't think he's good.
No, but that's the problem of basically recruiting kind of 2 people that are inherently flawed at that role. And you need to try to figure out who is better in this situation. And for me, I still feel if you were talking about pure outlet play, Eddie would give you a little bit more of a beneficial thing. But in terms of the press that we had to do, I still
I feel we created better space for Eddie though. Like I have something I've made as well, and basically I feel for me personally, our ability just to create space by having Saka pin Akanji high, and having Eddie peel to the right created a lot of space for Eddie. I feel like we put Havertz in situations underneath the ball, from long kicks, and he did okay. But I feel like tactically we created space for Eddie to exploit by having Saka pin Akanji high and having Eddie spin into that zone, off the centre back, off Diaz.
Well, I'll ask you. I'll revert the question. Do you want Eddie in that situation, or do you want Bukayo
No,
Saka?
I want Eddie in that situation. I think we all know we want Eddie in that situation. My point is that I feel like we had a better tactical use for Eddie than we did for Kai.
No. What I'm saying is even in this board that you say, so say you bring it up, right? And this is what Eddie did in order to peel. What you sacrifice is Bukayo Saka's freedom to be that first receiver. Bukayo
Yeah, of
Saka has
course.
to be deep in order to do that and allow that. And I think, look, that's fine to do, but you basically asked to play in the width, whereas with Kai, you're asking to play centrally, and that kind of forces Saka central. That's the
Mm.
difference that I think he had. I still think that we need a little bit more security from Kai in terms of being more involved in play, and I think he did well. But this is I think the bare minimum that you would expect of somebody of his role. So I don't think I would criticize him, but I don't think I would praise him to the same degree. For example, I feel that in general he shined a little bit more because Martinelli struggled in terms of the game, and Martinelli definitely wasn't fit. And he had moments, but I don't think he was as involved.
He
And
hasn't been sharp offensively for a while now. Pretty
well, I
much the
think
whole
he's still
preseason.
coming back from injury, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like he does look unfit, and so that's going to be something to work into. But I was just more impressed, I think, with our back line and our be able to receive. Odegaard had really bright moments too. Like I think he looked really good in pockets. He was somebody that I think offered himself. He didn't hide, but again, maybe that first time ball out to Saka is something that you would look to see a little bit more. But I think in general, that right hand side did amazing. And the left hand side did brilliant off the ball, but on it struggled a bit to kind of enforce itself. And I think the opposite is maybe true on the right. Like I think on the right, we were diligent in the press, but I think most of the work came from kind of the lefts off the ball. Whereas on it, we used the Ben White overlap. We used that kind of 2v1 with Saka to really create a lot more superiority. And that's really what was
I think obviously speaking of Ben White, we're gonna have to speak about the Havertz chance, but I think that Havertz chance was created through Declan Rice. Really, he dropped into the back three. He was central centre back. Partey was like the DM. Erdegaard even dropped, so we didn't really have numbers in the middle. In the moment, Saka even dropped, and then Saliba plays a great pass into Ben White, who had a beautiful first touch, and then went to the byline. Obviously, Kai Havertz missed. Do you think he should have scored? What do you think about the build up to the goal? What do you think about Ben White's first touch and the great pass? But like, firstly, do you think he should have scored? Do you think Havertz should have scored the chance in the 24th minute?
It's a tough one for me because it is behind him. Like if you actually go and you look back, it's behind him. He has to turn and swivel and get that on target. I think when he turns and swivels, he has enough time to kind of put it a little bit more to the side, let's say. But I think I'm being hypercritical. If I'm really being fair, ultimately the back pass is behind him. So it's less. I actually think the second chance that maybe we'll talk about is a lot more of a chance. The first one, I'll be like, okay, it's behind you and you make good to kind of get a shot on target at that point. But the second one, I'm a little bit more harsh.
I agree because I think he did well to get the shot off. Personally, the first one to turn around, and I think Ortega does make a great save because he shoots the way the keeper's coming from. So he tries to put a cross goal, Ortega saves it with his feet, and then obviously Martinelli almost scores as well, gets blocked.
Yeah.
Why do you think we couldn't create that as much? Because we didn't. We created it twice in the first half and not really in the second half. So why do you think we couldn't create that type of chance as much throughout the 90?
I think mainly, well, this is just my opinion anyway. From the wings, they tried to basically push our wingers a bit more wider and they weren't leaving much space between the lines to get the ball into areas wide for the cutbacks, if that makes sense. So basically, we're trying to isolate our wingers 1v1, so we can't. So they were trying to cut us off by trying to be defensively secure in wide areas, so we couldn't get the cutbacks. And that for me was the problem we were facing. I felt like Bukayo had that moment where when he cut inside and he got his shot off as well. But those moments weren't that often because they were trying to isolate wide 1v1 and trying to basically take the areas that we like to produce from that cutback, and as well as the half space kind of dink into the back post. They weren't as on as much. I mean, I don't know what you thought, George. That's what I was thinking.
I just felt that Partey struggled in the first 25 minutes, just technically.
I think he struggled all game, to be honest.
I think he grew into it second half, but yeah, I mean, the first half he really struggled, and that's why you kind of saw William Saliba step up, and even the second chance when you talk about the Havertz, when Odegaard drops into that pocket and he sends kind of a ball between the lines to Saka, like it's a good ball, but Saka's a lot to do to get onto that, and even for the cut back, there's a lot of space, and Havertz does well to kind of put himself in the box, but the finish is really poor. But it stems from Odegaard being able to play the pass. The first chance stems from William Saliba being able to play the ball out to Ben White really quickly, first time. I think Partey struggled with that. And so that's why we weren't able to create those 2v1s as effectively, really.
Mm.
But when we did, it was kind of like a knife cutting through butter. It was really a joy to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing is when you think about how this game progressed, like if you look through especially going into the second half, you're looking at. I feel like we grew into the second half a lot. I felt like they started off very well. We grew into it towards the end, especially the last 15 minutes, and they came out and they kind of tried to switch the way they built. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but they had Bernardo kind of come inside a little bit more, and he was kind of the solution to the press. If you'd like to, what did you make of Bernardo's role in the second half?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier, and it all stemmed from Kyle Walker having the freedom to step up, and it gave Bernardo Silva a lot more of a free role, and they kind of had Kevin De Bruyne come in the second half to be a little bit more of a presence between the lines. But if you have a fullback that's more willing to occupy the wide channel, then it leaves Bernardo free to basically either have a solution in the pivot, which is something they struggled with, or B, have a solution between the lines, right, and have a presence there. So it stemmed from them being a little bit more brave and pushing their fullback, namely the right fullback, when Kyle Walker, a lot higher up the pitch, and they needed to do that from the off because I feel that the only difference here, guys, is basically Martinelli's ability to be a defensive 1v1 matchup and Grealish's ability to be a defensive 1v1 matchup. Both teams used fullbacks to push wide, to push their wingers central. Both teams did this tactic, but only one of them had a more diligent kind of winger partner. And so that for me was basically the difference between the two teams. And I think going forward, I was very encouraged by City's lack of ability to progress centrally. I think that's going to be a problem for them when they face a team that's as athletic as we are. And I think we did the big brother thing to them, if I'm really being honest, which was really nice to see.
Because going into, I did say that as long as we don't get little brothered again, I'll be happy with the result, and we definitely didn't. But going into the second Havertz chance, it was created similarly on the right hand side. But Odegaard actually received the ball this time. I think he plays a great pass, and then we see what Saka is compared to every other right winger. Not many can shield the ball the way he did. Versus Kanji, a very strong centre back, he
He
protects the
does
ball.
so much in that chance, by the way. Like, that's a very hopeful ball.
Yeah, he runs from deep, runs past the Kanji, shields him off the ball, plays the ball with his right foot, and then Havertz swings at the ball with his right foot and misses. Do you think he should have scored? I think I know the answer, but do you think he should have scored that one? Okay, but why do you think that chance wasn't created as much? Because you do say it was a hopeful ball, but I don't think Odegaard really played that pass again throughout the 90. Even though it was early, it was like the 35th, 36th minute, I believe. Why do you think that wasn't played as much?
Well, I think that they were too worried about kind of the overlap on the other side, right? Like that at that point in time, I think that we could have done a little bit better. I thought that Thomas Partey's inability to be technically secure meant that Odegaard wasn't receiving in that pocket as often as he could. We weren't getting the ball out in those positions fast enough. And in fact, William Saliba has been the one consistently, if you go back, to really step up into midfield and force that ball and force that issue. So the big problem for me was that. And then once Partey grew into the game, I thought that we did access those channels a lot better. We just weren't as good transitioning from our middle third to the final third, in my opinion. We made some of the wrong decisions and we didn't get the ball to our most dangerous players fast enough. Well, what do you think? Because I feel like it's a leading question. Do you have a difference of opinion?
I think as the game, until we had three midfielders on the pitch, three offensive midfielders on the pitch, with Vieira, Odegaard, and Smith Rowe. I don't think Odegaard took the responsibility enough to play those types of passes. I don't necessarily believe he was involved much offensively to make those passes. And the way we got the ball, even and it was quick again, we didn't really have sustained pressure in the first half until very late into it. So I don't think we were ever in a position to really rotate the ball, get some confidence on the ball, just calm down and not really focus on defense. Because I think before the 30th minute, I don't remember a passage of play at all where we had the ball to develop it. So when we finally did, I think he gained some confidence to play such a pass. And then Saka being Saka just does that. I don't think... That's why I asked earlier about the right winger for Man City, because I don't think they have that. Like multiple times in the game, we created a shot on goal or were close to getting a shot on goal just because of Saka being who he is, just because of him being able to deal with any opposition 1v1, let it be the fastest left back in the world or one of the strongest playing in left back. He's not a left back, but one of the strongest playing in left back. And he dealt with that challenge very well. And that is leading, because I saw a lot of things saying Saka was not good yesterday. He was very poor. What did you make of that? What did you make of his performance?
No, that's narrative. That's just not true. It's just a lie. He was phenomenal yesterday. And again, I think it wasn't until Declan Rice really switched to the back line. Like, we didn't see that Declan Rice in the back three until a lot later on in the half, more consistently, right? And that responsibility is, I think, what opened things up massively for us. It gave Thomas Partey a lot more confidence. It gave Odegaard a lot more confidence. We struggled to really put our foot on the ball. And the one thing that I liked, though, in that first 30 minutes is that we were defensively resolute. And so despite us maybe struggling ourselves to build up effectively, just like City were, at least our defensive lines were quite compact. I don't think City's were, and so that for me was like a major positive. And then when I kind of went into the second half, we saw ourselves be a lot more brave on the ball. We saw a lot more ability for us to find people between the lines. And I just think it was from Declan Rice's shift. We kind of talked about it earlier in the pod about why and what were the exact technical qualities there. The one thing I wanted to bring up kind of just to end is, what did you guys think of Aaron Ramsdale's performance? Got a lot to say to people that say, Aaron Ramsdale's somebody that struggles. But, in the last 10 minutes, he keeps us in this game. Let's make no mistake about it. And, I don't think we can talk about the Phil Foden effect, because Phil Foden changed a lot for Man City. And again, I feel as though that it was his turn that gets away from Partey to create that big chance, right? And then it's him again to slip in Alvarez, or rather to be slipped in by Alvarez. He makes a brilliant run. So for me, I just think that, Aaron Ramsdale needs to be spoken about with a lot more respect. And I think just on the ball, he was phenomenal this game, by the way. The ball's clipped wide, the amount of pressure that they put him under, he wasn't phased. And the one thing that I will say, and I don't know about you guys, but his short passing, I thought he wasn't able to short pass. But here I am in this game seeing him find the free man consistently.
I obviously made a comp, and I literally just watched every single action he had throughout the whole 900. It wasn't 90. Throughout the whole 100. Throughout the whole 100. I think he was great. 3 big saves, the save from the corner, the save from Foden, the save from the corner again. Because the first one was a central Stones header. The other one was a Rodri header at the near post, which from my angle, I couldn't believe he saved it. Like, that was tucked right underneath his waist, and that really should have gone in. We probably should have been 3-0 down before we scored up, ignoring the Havertz chances and stuff like that. I think we should have been 3-0 down. I think he was great in the ball. He made Haaland really have to step all the way into the box. Like, he couldn't really cheat. You can't just sit on the edge of the box, let him pick out a pass. I do think his long balls were wasted centrally, because I don't think Havertz really picked up many of them, and that's why I asked, do you think he was great pinning the centre back? Because he didn't really do that. Because going into the game, I was thinking, if Nketiah's there, there's a ball into the channel, there's a ball he can just...
There's a fighter there that could win it.
Yeah, you always have a 50-50, but with Havertz, it really wasn't a 50-50. But Ramsdale picking out passes, 25-yard passes on the floor to Partey or to Rice in the midfield was great. It just took away the time City take walking up the ball with Ortega. And I think that him doing what he does is just the big difference between us. It's just we're a lot more direct. We waste a lot less time than going side to side without. And it just suits us. Him doing what he did yesterday really suited us, and we needed him. We needed him to save us 3 times. 4, the penalty. He saved the pen again, even though he can't save
Look,
pens.
this
but
is
he saved-
funny, but you know what? Honestly, like I have such an issue with this, but like it's just narrative analysis, and like I'm not saying Raul is doing this, but I mean a lot of people are on the timeline,
The
and
thing is because Raya was there.
No,
Because Raya was in-
Mikel said it himself. It was because they did a lot of practice on it in
well,
preseason.
there's
an
that,
emphasis on it.
and I just think that the distribution that everybody clamored that he was so off against Man United, against Barcelona, he was on point against the toughest team in the worst press of the 3. By the way, so in the worst
just
conditions,
the toughest team period
yes,
in
and
the world.
Look, again, I will say this. Aaron Ramsdale, for me, his mentality is a lot different. I never worry against Aaron Ramsdale against the biggest teams in the league. I worry against Forest at home, and I never worry against City at the Etihad. That boy will step up, and he will do every action perfect there. Look, is that still a worry? Of course it is. You don't want your keeper to basically switch that much. But I mean, this idea that Aaron Ramsdale struggles with any kind of distribution pass is something that I laugh at. This idea that he's not somebody to stand up in the big moments and keep us in games is something that I laugh at as well. And I just think that we need to be a little bit more, fair in our analysis of kind of Aaron Ramsdale. Because for me, stupendous in this game. And if it wasn't just for Ben White and him being an absolute world class right back, he has a shout for being, man of the match along with William Saliba. Like those 3 for me were phenomenal.
I think they were the only ones who had full 90s of excellence, because I don't think anyone else on our team was rubbish at all, but I don't think anyone else was great for a 90. And I think Partey and Rice have a level to go to. But on Ramsdale was really on the second half, because he had to step in and save us in the second half because they didn't create much. And the second half was really the last 30, because the last 40, because when De Bruyne and Cole Palmer came on the 63rd minute is when the game really changed. We saw De Bruyne be who he is, pick up ball in certain pockets and play really any pass he chooses to play. Like he played a pass with his left foot around the whole defense and he nearly created a chance on the edge of the 6 yard. How do you think that change impacted the game? Because I think the first half was really a them versus our defense until the 25th minute. And now in the second half, up until the 65th minute, nothing happened for me. Nothing of note happened. No real chances were created. So what did you make of how they impacted the game and how they scored within like 10, 15 minutes?
I mean, go ahead, Kirk. Go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry.
No, I mean, it was just it was frustrating for me because then everybody put their attention onto Kieran Tierney, and then for me, no one's talking about the Phil Foden turn, and it's just insanely frustrating because again, like I said, they struggled with Alvarez to get presence between the lines, and Phil Foden did a lot for them. I think if Phil Foden starts the match, I think we are in for a different game. Yeah. He was very good centrally. He needs more responsibility, and he needs to get more confidence himself as a player. Phil Foden, by the way, I think he's really personally stagnated in the last couple of years.
Do you think sorry to cut you off, but do you think he'll ever get that responsibility with De Bruyne at the club or with De Bruyne starting?
No. We've said this in the past, right? Like they have to transition with De Bruyne being the one to kind of relinquish that, power, let's say. And it's really ironic because he's actually much better in build-up than Kevin De Bruyne. Like their main problem right now is having a secondary passer to Rodri after having lost Gundogan, and you're sitting there saying, why don't you use this player who can absolutely do it, or at least push Bernardo Silva there and keep Phil Foden high at right wing? Like I just didn't understand some of the decision makings there from Pep, but ultimately when you have a look at it, I think people should go back and watch the Kieran Tierney chant. I don't think that's his fault. If anything, Gabriel should be the one that should be going out.
Gabriel shouldn't let Tierney have the thought to go, because if Gabriel is shifted over, Tierney doesn't run to it. But Tierney sees Gabriel and for me, because I was arguing with someone earlier about it, but for me, if I was Tierney and I run to just stand in front of Gabriel, because Gabriel was blocking the shot, if you just stand in front of him, the pass to Walker's open and Walker plays a cutback to one of 3 players and they probably score. That's what they wanted. But he carved the pass, then tried to come over. Gabriel should have stepped up, but I think that goal is on Partey anyways. Partey was too over aggressive. For 50 minutes before that, he was fine. He was great. And then he became over aggressive again for that one moment, and it killed us. There was too much space for Rice to cover alone. Tierney does well actually initially for the interception, but unluckily it bounced to De Bruyne, and then
And the funniest thing is he's already off balance from the interception, and yet people want him to slide with horizontal agility inside or
and
wait.
stop.
Like
They want him to stop perfectly right in front,
yeah.
whilst not thinking about the overlap. It doesn't make sense.
No, it was very strange, and I think it was a breakdown from Partey. Let's just have it right. Like Partey stops that chance. We're not as open.
No, but it's not just that he was a foot. There was no reason to be that aggressive. You know what Phil Foden is? Phil Foden is literally, his main ability is half turn. That is who he is. He is Mr. Half Turn. He's so good at receiving and turning into space. And he's gone touch tight to him. There's no reason for that.
I also think if he was already touch tight, the pass isn't played. He's recovering. He was running into it. He allowed him to turn him. Because I think if you notice that you're just too far already, just keep a distance. Don't give him the space, because Partey created the space. The space wasn't there until
And one thing too, by the way, as a defensive coach, by the way, if your center back isn't going to step up, which Gabriel should have, by the way, like he should have allowed Tierney to slide wide and Gabriel to step up, but he wasn't. And so if you're going to do that, your coach is going to lambaste you for picking the wide option and letting somebody get a shot central, because ultimately that's what the issue kind of arose from, right? That kind of indecision moment. And ultimately he stuck central, which is what he should have done. I just wish Tierney would have actually allowed the wide overlap. Like, I think that's one thing that I would have told Kieran Tierney if I was a coach, where, listen, let it go. Like, I don't care receiving a chance out wide than I do central. So if you're going to be outnumbered and you're going to be a 2v1, don't even think about the wide overlap option. I'm going to yell at the center back who's not sliding to cover you, but make sure you stop the shot centrally.
That was the theme in all three phases, wasn't it? The theme of the game was central dominance. Keep the central tight, keep the spaces short, make sure that the press is compact centrally, make sure we build through the middle, don't go for these wide overloads, don't go in this U-shaped pattern. The whole game was patterned around keeping compact centrally so we can basically nullify the threats that they possess. And it's funny to me that the one chance and the one goal we conceded was because we decided to let the central option go whilst the wide option was being chased. And it was kind of, it was ironic to me because the entire philosophy of the game was central compactness. And I think in all phases of the pitch. So for me, it was just funny to see that the one chance we conceded, because honestly, apart from the Foden chance, I think the Rodri chance in the first half and the goal, I mean,
the Rodri one wasn't even a chance. He took a shot from 25 yards. And it came from a Partey pass. They didn't create anything.
They didn't create much at all. So
they didn't create much at all. So
my main point is I just found it kind of tad ironic that it was a central chance. Hell of a finish, by the way. Rolled it on and
look, I think it was the one time that we left ourselves open. We left ourselves running back to goal. And look, when you're in a breakdown like that, then obviously you're hoping that everybody makes the best decisions 1v1 in order to bail yourself out, because you're. So
do you, as I understand, George, you would have put the focus on blocking the cross rather than like letting the cross happen. Let Walker get the ball. So you would have said just try block the cross rather than taking the pass away for him to cross.
Well, factually, it's more dangerous. There's a better shot location central. So always stop that. And then I would bank on, if I'm going to allow a shot, I would way rather it be out wide from a cross in versus kind of stopping a shot centrally. Because when you're central, you have a lot more easier chance of getting a shot on target. That's simply what it is. And I feel that we had bodies back. So stopping the cross was not something that we would struggle with. Like, we actually had people central. And so that was the frustrating thing, I think, from my end. And but anyways, I think after that point, Trossard comes on, and I guess Emile Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira as well. I don't think I saw much in the changes, if I'm really being honest with you. I think the team stuttered a bit to accommodate all those attacking midfielders, I'll be honest. We kind of got a little bit more between the lines, but we really struggled to really orient ourselves. And There were some nice touches from people, but if I'm really being fair, I don't think any of them had a big influence on the game. Trossard, again, comes up with a goal that's a deflected goal. The one thing I'll say is you can't really praise too much from that, but the one thing I will say is we've got somebody willing to shoot and let it fly on target. That's the reason that Trossard generates these high quality chances, is because I don't think he's afraid to release.
On
And he's
at
not
any
afraid to
angle,
release.
actually. He shoots at any angle of both feet. He will literally let it go. I think the positive in that was that they brought him and Emil Smith-Rowe's combination, brought us up the pitch. We couldn't get out of our half through Tierney and Gabriel and Saliba. Like, we couldn't pass through on the right-hand side. The ball had to be switched to the left, and they combined to bring us up the pitch. I think Arteta is what he does whenever we're down 1-0 with 5, 10, 15 left. He just throws attackers on.
It's the Wenger. It's the Wenger.
Takes away the defenders.
Well, I mean, I remember when we came out the game. I went to Chris. This is just, he just went full Wenger. As many 10s as I can find. Any 10 on the pitch. I
was thinking, I started thinking like, Gabriel's coming off for Smith-Rowe. So who the hell is going centre back and who's going left back? Who's going right back? And I was like, it's just Gabriel centre back, Tierney left centre back, and we hope for the best. That's what I think he was thinking. And they didn't really do anything on the ball after they scored. They just sat back and said, break us down. And that we really did. Because I think apart from that, what do you talk about apart from the pens? Because I think, what did you make of the pens then? What did you guys make of?
From the pens, I'll be honest, I was actually surprised when I'm starting to go through the list how many excellent penalty takers we have now. I thought that was a weakness last season. That's the one thing I took away. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wow, so we've got Havertz, who objectively is excellent at penalties. We've got Jorginho, excellent at penalties. We've got Trossard, excellent at penalties. Odegaard has got a phenomenal finish on him at penalties. He just can't do it when he's arriving to it. But I joke.
Give him time to.
I joke.
You have to clarify that. But standing still, that I think his penalty was great. Vieira, despite missing the United one, was it United one badly? The other two ones were perfect.
Vieira's technique has always been, from dead ball situations, phenomenal.
That was a perfect penalty, unsavable. And then the Bruins, I think it just showed City are a good penalty team. They haven't really been. Did
you not read the James thread? Because it was
on penalties.
Like, the thing is, I was talking to him after the game. We spoke for about half an hour about these penalties, and he was telling me, because it's actually his dissertation is actually on the psychology behind penalties, and he was telling me about how if you take a pause after the whistle gets blown, it gives you a minute to relax, take a deep breath, and the goal becomes a lot bigger. And he was showing me clips of, for example, from Ivan Toney, from when he was starting out. He's missed 2 penalties in his career, and I think the first one, he just literally, as soon as the whistle went, he started running. And if you look at both De Bruyne's and Rodri's penalty, as soon as the whistle went, they just started running at the ball. It didn't give them a chance to compose themselves. And I think we did that very well. We took our time.
What do you guys think about this? Because I saw a lot of this. Saka shouldn't be he said doesn't need to be, but I'm saying Saka shouldn't be our penalty taker anymore. Do you think he will still be or shouldn't be, or do you think that there will be a change there just because he missed? Who did he miss against? West Ham.
No, you take that away from him, then you're basically telling him you're not the star of the team, and he is the star of the team in every action that he does. It's who he is. He's going to take responsibility. So I would focus more on just his technique, and it's not bad to begin with.
You know, on the pen, what I realized yesterday, because I obviously recorded myself on every pen just to see something. When Saka takes the pen, I worry a lot more.
I do too. 100%.
Each and every single player taking a pen. I think
it's because you want him to succeed. You know what I mean?
And because I know the reaction if he misses one. I know what comes after he misses one. But I think the pens were special. Declan Rice, Havertz, Timber won a trophy.
The irony in it, though, is I would argue in the starting 11, and let's assume that Havertz isn't necessarily in the starting 11 because we don't know that 100% yet. Martinelli is probably the best penalty taker in that original starting 11.
But he's the only one. He's the only one that's missed one in the shootout.
I was
And
just gonna
Saka.
say. I was just gonna say. So ironically, if you actually look at the sample, our bench options are the better penalty takers in general. Trossard,
Mm.
Jorginho, Havertz, like Fabio Vieira. Like these ball strikers are our best penalty takers, but they're not starting 11s. And the only reason I'm bringing this point is Saka is our best dead ball specialist in terms of the starting 11. And people just worry a lot more. The only one that I could think argue is Martinelli. And I do think that Martinelli should maybe take a little bit more
Well,
responsibility in pens in general.
Rice takes pens. Rice used to take pens at
Rice does.
West
Rice is
Ham.
really good as well. He's
Mm.
got a good
But you
technique.
can't give Rice you can't give a non-attacker unless it's Jorginho. I think Jorginho is the only one you can say to him and let
Yeah.
that not be as big a problem. Oh, if Jorginho's on the pitch, he's taking pens for us. I think that's the
Okay.
only player
Do you know
really.
do you know what I would argue? If you're willing to take that away from Saka, are you then saying that you don't want Saka arriving in the final third to finish chances because he misses? Like
Mm.
by basically taking that away, you're taking his power, and you have to give him the responsibility. And I think that if as long as we as fans continue to make this a thing, the more of a thing it's going to be for Saka. Because I assure you, he doesn't care, like on the day to day.
Until you make him. Until you make him care about it.
Exactly, and you make him care by taking him off the responsibility. So for me, I just focus on making sure you isolate your technique because again, he's got a very good backlift. When he focuses, I just think he overthinks things at times, and I think he
Mm.
just needs to. For me, when I was coaching penalties, I used to say, "Go up, and we're gonna practice what you're gonna do every time with every keeper. You're going to have the same shot consistently." And I think that any time that you second guess yourself, by the way, in terms of both the selection, in terms of both the shot selection, and the player that you want taking that penalty, that's when you lose. That's when you
But
start to create jeopardy.
but looking at his record though, he's missed one, but he scored against Chelsea versus Mendy, United versus De Gea, Alisson, Liverpool, Edison,
No, his sample
Ortega
succeeding
yesterday.
is far more than his sample failing.
Yeah,
It's
he's
just
missed
people's
once,
fears.
obviously, since his first pen, being in the European final, making no sense. Since
Yeah,
his first pen, he's missed one out of 6.
8,
No, wait, 1 out of 6, right?
6.
I believe it's 6. He's missed 1 out of 6, 7 since that day. Oh,
Yeah,
he took one in the Europa League penalty shot he scored. Yeah, 1 out of 6 or 7. He's taken one. So if you're telling someone that hit rate is not acceptable, then I don't know what is. Because Jorginho has missed a pen. Are you telling them as soon as you miss one, someone else has to take one? Because I think I don't think he should be taken off unless like someone's on a hat trick and he says, "Oh, Martinelli get a hat trick." He has to be willing to give someone the ball, I think. But yeah,
yeah. The only one would be Trossard. I'll be honest. Like I love Trossard's technique from dead ball
mm,
situations, and I think he's probably one of our best ball strikers in the squad. Period. So he's another one that's kind of like an exception. But no, I would not take him off penalties at all.
but yeah, I think that's really it.
Yeah.
Curran was right, sadly. 1-1, winning on penalties. So Curran does get 3 points. Do
I
I
do
have the
indeed.
table today? No. I will have the table for the start of the next game when we do predict. Don't worry, Curran, before you say something. But yeah, it was a great game.
I
It
did.
was
I did tell you. Do you remember what I said after the game? Get
Yeah,
the
he
table,
told me have
brother.
it ready. I was right. I don't care. Anyways, it's a long season. We could play 50, 60 games if we go far and everything. So they will see that. I think it was great to be at the game. George, you didn't watch the game live, did you?
No, I couldn't.
Yeah, unlucky. It was a great game to watch live. 102nd. I almost got kicked out of the city end, by the way, because of the way I celebrated the goal. I don't know if you can tell I'm losing my voice, but it was a great game to be at. But yeah, Karen and George, overall, what did you make of the game? What do you take away from the game? What do you implications of this game will have on the future of our season?
No, I'm ecstatic. Obviously, like I was really big on the preview. I think I went a lot harsher than most people on the timeline in terms of how important this game was. At least for me, we needed to draw blood. We needed to beat City in a competitive fixture, and I think the implications are that we start the season strong. And I think that it kind of makes the boys realize that it's their first chance of silverware. It's the first taste of it. And I don't buy this idea that there's a cheap trophy. A trophy is a trophy. And trust me, for the team that's young, that's inexperienced, winning a trophy is how you gain experience. Like the irony that I've seen is that everybody that puts us down in terms of not winning the title is because of a lack of experience, and then downplays the experience of winning a trophy. Make that make sense? But yeah, I'm ecstatic for it, and I think that the team deserves it. And what's really ironic, this wasn't even our best team. Like I think we did this with a team that for us is still a mix mash, and I'm really excited about that.
I mean, for me, I think I said it during the penalty shootout. As long as, but I was just happy that we got it to penalties. I'll be honest with you, just being able to get it to a point where we didn't lose the game. That was the main thing for me. We didn't get little brothered. We didn't get any scars inflicted on us. And then obviously to win it was great. I mean, I said to the guy next to me, as long as Rodri misses a penalty, I'm happy. Just let that guy miss a penalty.
I said the same thing. My least favorite player.
Like genuinely, just let that guy miss a penalty. I think the main thing we showed was that I personally feel in terms of as physicality wise, I think we can go toe to toe with City any day of the week. I think we can really show that we aren't there to be bullied. Like you saw some of the stupid yellow cards the ref was giving, especially during that first half, was just ridiculous. And our heads didn't drop, the levels didn't drop. I think it's City always going to do. They're going to find a solution to whatever you present them. But the fact that we stayed in the game and we managed to find a solution ourselves is the main thing for me. And Mikel said it best. He was saying that we made our subs. The belief didn't drop between the players, and we just kept going. And that's what you have to do. And we showed that last season, the ability to do that, but not against City. I think if you're getting a last-minute winner against City or a last-minute equalizer against City, it's different than a 3-2 versus Bournemouth. City is a different thing. You have to be able to just stay in those games, get the points, or get the trophy, whatever it is. You have to stay in that game. So I'm just happy we managed to find a way to stay in the game and eventually win it, of course. So first game, last 2 competitive games for Declan Rice, 2 trophies. Good for the guy. Happy for him. Some real. I mean, I'm glad that we got Matty Turner a medal as well. Before he heads off to Nottingham Forest, he looked pretty emotional after the game. I think this was his dream to play for Arsenal, and he managed to do it. So to leave with a medal is something I'm happy for him. And then we go again. Still no Rob Holding in sight. Happy days.
George's favorite player.
Yep.
But yeah, for me, I think it was a great game and great experience to win at Wembley. Arteta's now 4-4 at Wembley, the semi, the final, the community shield. Hopefully we make it 8 of 8 this season, go to everything and win everything. But yeah, it was great, I think, to finally beat them, this team to beat them, because last time we beat them wasn't this team. These guys haven't beat City. They haven't won a trophy. The FA Cup, they were there. Saka, Saliba, they were there. But they didn't, apart from Saka, they didn't win it. So yeah, this team has won a trophy. Then they're nice to go through. I think the ref was awful. At least we didn't have to talk about him. Like the game, you can talk about him away from it. They had twice the fouls. We had 3 times the yellow cards. Make it make sense. I think it's great to go into Forest with a win. Everyone talking about you as winners. And yeah, hopefully we continue to dominate teams the way we dominate City. Because despite them having better possession, I think we were the better team by far throughout the 90. And that's it for me, honestly. This team still has levels to go throughout the season. Our pivot, I think, could have 2 times better performance than what we saw yesterday. So yeah, I think we were a great team, and we will be back on Wednesday. Not Arsenal. BoP will be back on Wednesday. So go on, George. You can do your thing when you're ready.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. Make sure you guys like the video. Click the bell for notifications to know when, in fact, we do upload. Subscribe. You can find all the boys' socials down below. So I'm at GeorgeV_AFC. Of course, Chris is at CKFTBL. Of course, Curran's at CurranBOP, and we're Ball Over Passion here on YouTube or at BOP Footy on Twitter. So, guys, thank you so much again for all of the comments, and we really love the engagement. We'll be back for you again on Wednesday, and we'll catch you guys then. All right, peace, boys.
Peace.